Okay, so welcome to lesson 1 of our History Mysteries topic. Just as a kind of quick recap of maybe what you already know about Victorian time or about crime and punishment through time as well, we've got a 3 thoughts task. So you don't have to write this down, you can just kind of have a think about it, or if you really want to, you could post it into the channel and we could have a chat about it as a class. Whatever feels right for you, that's absolutely fine. So the first thing is, how many different punishments can you think of for crimes? So this could be through history, it could be today. Try to be a little bit inventive if you can, but see if you can think of like 3 things that would be different punishments that could be used for crimes. The second thing, in your opinion, what do you think the very worst type of punishment would be? Now, the automatic thing people tend to think about for this one is that it might be execution. So maybe in the past being beheaded or hanged for a crime would be the worst punishment, but is it worse if you are sent away someplace else? Is it worse if you have to do hard labour as punishment? Have a think about what you think is the worst punishment that you could receive in, say, Victorian times or even today for a crime. For the third thing, now that you've got in your head what is the worst possible punishment, what sort of crime do you think this punishment should go with? So what type of crime would earn this particular type of punishment if there was only allowed to be one crime where this was the punishment for it? What would it be in your opinion? So again, you can write down some answers to these. It's just to kind of get you thinking a little bit about what you maybe already know and recognise some prior learning, and to get you to think about what sort of judgments you would be making. Okay, so first heading then, can you make sure that wherever you've decided you're doing your notes, whether it be in a jotter, in some paper that you can keep in a ring binder, or if you've got a notepad at home, that's fine. Or if you're using the OneNote notebook on the Teams channel, then you could put it in there. Okay, crime and punishment in Victorian Britain. Or if you're just doing it on a Word document and on your computer or on your phone and you just want to keep your notes there, that's absolutely fine. But do it somewhere where you can actually find your information quite easily without having to go hunting for it later on, because you are going to need to use these notes there. So crime and punishment in Victorian Britain is our first lesson, and we are investigating what Victorian punishments would have looked like. There are 3 success criteria points. You can see them down the side of the PowerPoint, and these will turn a different colour as we go through them. They'll be yellow when we're working on that particular success criteria point, and then they'll turn green when we should have met the point. So 3 different things. We are thinking about describing these typical Victorian punishments. We are looking at explaining how the different types of crime were actually punished, so what different things you could be punished for. And in particular, we're interested in analysing what happened to young people that were being punished in the Victorian period. So people that would roughly be about your age, maybe just a little bit younger, a little bit older, definitely from sort of first year ages. What would happen to them if they were being caught committing some sort of crime? Because obviously today we know what happens to people that commit crimes at your age, but at Victorian times it was a lot more ruthless. So we're thinking about what happened there. So just a little bit of background information for you about this topic in general. This era, the Victorian era, which our whole topic is set in, goes from 1836 to 1901. So that's the period of time when Queen Victoria, probably one of the most famous British queens, and you can see pictures of her there, so an actual photograph as she's older and a painting of her when she just became queen. This period is when she ascends to the throne, so that means when she becomes queen and she's coronated, and up to the point when she dies in 1901. So this whole period, the Victorian era, is where Queen Victoria was on the throne. So that's what we're talking about, just to set the scene a little bit for you. So our first success point is describing some typical Victorian punishments. So for this slide I'm going to put up some pictures, and what you should try to do is, as you can see them coming up, guess what you think the punishment actually is. So there's 4 pictures there. See if we can guess what the actual punishment is for each one. I will tell you because we can't obviously feed that back as a class at the moment. So these 4 punishments tended to be the most common ones that you would find being used in Victorian courts. Hanging, the top corner one, is the most obvious way of execution. The one that you maybe didn't know based on that picture is hard labour. So what you can see happening in this picture is some men who are being chained to what is called a walking wheel, and their task is literally to walk on this walking wheel, and it would be used to kind of grind flour and things like that, and they would just walk on this for days. And it could be, this is one example of hard labour, but also it could be things like breaking rocks, it could be things like moving very heavy materials or building, things like that. Any sort of labour job that they needed people to do, criminals could be made to do it as punishment. And this could be for a few days, a couple of months, or even years, just depending on how serious your crime was and also how vindictive your judge was. Victorian judges were very, very strict and very, very difficult to plead with. The one with the picture of Australia is deportation, so this would mean that you would be sent away. They would just exile you from the country and send you someplace else. And for Britain at this point in time, Australia was a really common place where they like to send prisoners to work, and the reason for this is because there is nowhere else for them to go. They don't need to be locked up in Australia, they can just live there with the rest of these people who are setting up the colonies and the settlements in Australia, because remember at this point in time there wouldn't have been an awful lot of people living there that were not native to Australia, so the new people moving in would have been building towns and cities like we can see today, and the prisoners would go in and work there. If they ran away, there was nowhere else for them to go to. There was no other cities or towns or settlements at this point in Australia, so if they did run away, then they just ran the risk of dying or ended up coming back. The last one is solitary confinement. Basically what this would mean is you would be put into prison and you would be put into a cell by yourself and locked away for however long they decided to put you there. So these are the kind of the more common ones that we're going to look at. So for this next task, now that we've thought about what the typical Victorian punishments would be, we're going to look at this in a little bit more detail and try to explain the different types of crime that were actually punished in Victorian Britain. So to do this, we're going to do a table task. So what you're going to have to do is draw the table that you can see on the slide into your notes or into your jotter, wherever you're doing this, and you're going to need at least 7 rows and 7 columns. So you maybe want to turn your page so that you're doing it landscape, or you might want to get a big piece of paper and do it, whatever is easiest for you. You're only going to need maybe 2 or 3 lines in each box, so they don't have to be really huge boxes, they can just be 2 or 3 lines long. So you need one for the name of the criminal that we're going to look at. You need to work out how old they are, so you need that box just for a number. You need to have the next box for the crime that they committed, and then what year their crime was committed in. You're then going to decide what their punishment's going to be, and you're only going to have to put a letter into that box, or just one word, it's up to you, and then a small reason why you think they deserve this, and this can just be a quick bullet point. The last column you need is just a tick or a cross column, and I'll explain what you're going to do with each one. So we're going to use the next slides with information about each crime to fill in this green section of the table. So who the criminal was, how old they were, what crime they committed, and what year they committed the crime in. You're then going to decide in the blue column what you think the punishment should be out of a Victorian punishment list that I'm going to give you. And then in the last column, all you need to do is put a reason why you've picked that. There's no right or wrong answer, it's just entirely your opinion. So pause the video, set up your table to make sure that you've got all the information that you need into it, and then press play to have a look at the next bits of information about each crime. So criminal number 1, Eliza Chambers. So she was 39 years old. The date of her crime was 1790. The crime that she committed was that she refused to pay tolls, which was a tax, on a brand new road that had been opened. And she took part in a riot that burned down the gate to the road in protest for the taxes. When she was arrested and questioned, she said, "Why should I pay to use a road I have used free of charge for 30 years? So it was a road that she had used for a very long time, but now it was a brand new road that they'd built on top of this old road, and they were being charged to use it, and she was refusing to pay. So in terms of the information that we're looking at for our table, this part here is her name, so put that into our name column. She's 39, so put that into her age. The date that the crime was committed is 1790, so put that into the date bit. And what she actually did, so the crime she committed, and we can just say she refused to pay tolls or tax. So she was refusing to pay tax. And you can add in she took part in a riot if you want to as well, but that would be enough if you only wrote the first bit in. So that fills in our green box section. Now what you're going to do is decide what type of punishment do you think she should get. So you're pretending in this situation you are the Victorian judge. You're deciding what type of punishment this crime should get. So all you have to do is write down the letter in your punishment box and then give a reason why you've picked that. So do you think she should get A, solitary confinement for a day, B, hard labour, so this forced labour work for 14 days, C, go to prison for 7 years, D, transportation to Australia for 7 years, E, prison with hard labour for 10 years, should she F, be transported to Australia for the rest of her life, so just sent to Australia and that's it, or G, be transported to Australia for life but also get 14 years of hard labour while she's in Australia, or should she H, be executed by hanging? So in your first blue box, just decide on what letter you think you would give this crime. Again, there's no right or wrong answer for you just now, you're just deciding, and then why you think that. We'll go through the rest of them, and then once we've filled in all of the different ones, so this is the first one out of 7, I'll then tell you what the actual crime was, and you can mark off if you were right or wrong in your red column. So feel free to pause the video while you fill in the information, and then press play when you're ready to move on. Criminal number 2, Georgeson. He was 35 years old, and in 1810 he published a leaflet saying that the king should be removed from the country and it should not have a monarch. So we should not have a monarch, we should be like France, very revolutionary sort of talk for 1810, and that's what George did. So again, I'll help you with this one just to kind of begin with. In our name section, we've got Georgeson, and obviously you'll be much neater than I am when I'm highlighting. He is 35 years old. His crime was committed in 1810, and he published a leaflet. Okay, so this fills in our green column. So for our blue column, decide A, B, C, D, E, F, G or H, whatever crime punishment you think he should get as the judge. Write the letter you think and give a reason why you think that in your blue column. Again, pause the video if you want while you take a second to fill that in, and then we'll move on to criminal number 3. Okay, criminal number 3 then. Benjamin Walker, aged 29. He confessed in 1812 to murdering another man called William Horsfall. He was the owner of a cotton factory, William Horsfall. But Benjamin said, the evil machines are taking away our jobs. How are we supposed to support our families? So that was what he did. He killed the owner because the owner was using machines rather than people, and he'd obviously lost his job. So this is the last one I'm going to kind of help with, but this one, his name, Benjamin Walker. It's not very neat, but there you go. He is 29 years old. His crime was committed in 1812. He murdered William Horsfall. That's his crime that he commits, and that fills our green column. So now you decide what type of punishment are you going to give him from A to H, and give a reason why you've picked that particular crime. You can use the same punishments as many times as you want to. It's not like if you used B last time you can't use it this time. You can use whatever you feel like as many times as you want to. So again, pause the video if you want to and fill in this bit for Benjamin Walker, and then press play, and we will go on to criminal number 4. Okay, criminal number 4 is Margaret Kelly. She is 42 years old, and she was arrested in 1825 for stealing 4 hen's eggs from a nest by the side of the road. She said that she did it because of the bad weather. She'd only had 2 days worth of work this week, and that her children were starving and she didn't have enough money to feed them. So her name, and I did say the last slide would be the last one I helped with, but I'm practicing my highlighting skills. So Margaret Kelly is her name. She's 42 years old. The date of her crime is 1825, and she stole 4 hen's eggs. That's the crime she committed. So this fills in our green box. You pick for the blue box, what is she going to get as her punishment, and why have you picked that punishment? Pause the video, fill in your information, and then we'll move on to criminal number 5. Okay, criminal number 5 then, John Frost, aged 45. He led an army of 4,000 rebellious miners to try and release their friends from jail, so he tried a jailbreak. They were in there because they believed that every man, no matter how rich he was, should be able to vote. So this is at a point where not all men have the vote either, only rich men have it, and they thought everybody should, so they got arrested, and John Frost and his rebellious miner friends tried to break them out. So John Frost is his name, 45 years old. We don't have a date on this one, so we'll just leave that one blank. And we could say he led an army to try and release their friends from jail. Or you could put that into your own words, a little bit better than that. So pick a punishment for John, fill in your blue column with which letter you've picked, and give a reason why. Again, pause the video, and then we'll move on to the next criminal. So our next criminal then is Samuel Dublack, who was 42 years old. He was arrested in Bedford in 1850 for using bad language. He was suspected of having too much to drink at his daughter's wedding, which was taking place at the time, and he swore at one of the carriage boys. So, Samuel, that's his name, he's 42. 1850 is when he commits the crime, and the crime he commits is that he uses bad language. He swears at a carriage boy. So, fill in your information, pick your crime, and give a reason why. Pause the video, fill in your details, and then move on to our next criminal. So our last criminal then is Robert Jordan, aged 17. He was arrested in 1863 because he feloniously, willfully and with malice killed and murdered Frederick Budd. Budd had been trying to mug him at the time. So Robert Jordan was arrested because he had killed a man who was trying to mug him. So his name, we know, is Robert Jordan. He is 17 years old. The crime is in 1863. And he murdered Frederick Budd, who was trying to mug him at the time. So fill in your green side of your table, decide what punishment he's going to get and why you've picked that one. Pause the video so that you can do this, and then once you're done and you've got all of your criminal's details filled in, move on to the next part of the task. So by this point then we should have our 7 criminals with their name, their age, the crime they committed and the year they committed it in. You should have then decided what punishment you were giving them, and you could have just written the letter, or you could have written down whatever the punishment actually was, that's fine, and then you've got a reason why you think that. So why have you picked that particular crime punishment? In the last column then, this red one here, what we're going to do is I'm going to now go back through them and I'll tell you what the actual punishment was, because these are actual crimes from census records that we actually have. So if you are right and you have picked the right punishment and it's the same as what actually happened to them, then you put a tick in the column and you give yourself 0 points. If you are wrong, you put an X in the column, and if the letter of punishment that you have given them is lower than the one they got, so say for example you've given them an A but actually they got an F, then you would give yourself 2 points. That means you've been too kind. If the other way around, you've given them an F but actually they only got an A, it means you've been too mean. You give yourself 4 points. And at the end, what we're going to do is we're going to add up your points total and try to see what type of Victorian judge you would have been. So back to Eliza Chambers then. She actually received E for refusing to pay her tax on this new road and for taking part in the riot. She got 10 years in prison with hard labour. So she was sent to prison for 10 years and she got hard labour. So if you got it right and you picked the right one, give yourself a tick and put 0 points. If you got it wrong, put an X. And if you said anything from A to D, you give yourself 2 points. If you said anything above E, you give yourself 4 points. Georgeson then, for the leaflet of the king, he was sent to Australia for life and got 14 years hard labour there. So G was the answer for him. So if you got it right, put a tick and give yourself 0 points. If you got it wrong, put an X. And if you said anything above G, give yourself 2 points for being too lenient. And if you hanged the man, then give yourself 4 points because you were too mean. Benjamin Walker then, he had been accused of murder. Doesn't matter if he had a reason for murder or not, the only thing that could happen to him would be execution by hanging. So if you were right, put a tick with 0 points. If you said anything else that was not hanging, put an X and give yourself 2 points for being too lenient. Margaret Kelly, the person that steals the hen's eggs, she got 14 days hard labour, so she got B was her punishment. 14 days of hard labour and then she was free to go. So if you got it right, put a tick, 0 points. If you didn't put B, put an X, and if you put A, give yourself 2 points. If you give her anything harsher than that, give yourself 4 points for being too mean. John Frost, with the rebellious miners, he received transportation to Australia for life. So F was the answer for him. So again, if you got it right, put a tick and 0 points. If you put anything below E, put an F, put an X and give yourself 2 points. If you put anything over F, so G or H, give yourself an X and put 4 points. Samuel Dublack then, the man that was arrested for swearing, he was sent to solitary confinement for 1 day. So if you were right, give yourself a tick and 0 points. If you said anything else, give yourself an X and 4 points for being too harsh. Last one then, Robert Jordan, age 17, killed the man that was trying to mug him. Normally this would be a hanging offence, but because he was being attacked and he was defending himself, then he was only sentenced to 7 years in prison. It's also worth noting, it's a bit of a cheek, so I didn't tell you before, but Robert Jordan's father was particularly wealthy, as was Robert, which is why he was being mugged, so he didn't get as harsh a punishment as maybe one of the poorer people would have gotten for the same crime, because his family had a lot of money and could pay. So, if you put anything after C, give yourself an X and 4 points. If you put C, give yourself a tick and 0 points. If you put A or B, give yourself an X and 2 points. So now you're going to add your totals up. So add the total number of points that you've got up and see how you would have done as a Victorian judge. So if your complete total for all of these punishments is between 0, so you got them all right, or 4 points, you were a little bit harsh maybe once or twice, or a little bit lenient once or twice, then you are a Victorian super judge. That means your sense of justice is fair, and to be perfectly honest, you're a bit ahead of your time. Victorian judges were not overly about justice and fairness. They were about making sure that this type of crime would never be committed again and trying to prevent it by punishing the people really harshly so that anybody else that would maybe think to do this type of crime would be put off doing it. They tended to think that the poor people in Britain were the ones that were actually responsible for crime, because rich people didn't commit crimes, they just tended to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. So they tended to be more harsh towards the poorer people, because again, it was more poor people that came towards them more often for theft and things like that, because they were the hungry people or they were the ones that were stealing and things. So they tended to be really harsh because they were used to seeing poor people, which made them think all poor people are criminals, so we need to be really harsh with them to prevent them from spreading this. If you got between 4 and 12 points, so you're not always right, but it doesn't matter, because you're in charge, so nobody would dare question you. You're actually probably more of a Victorian super judge than anybody else is. That means you're exactly where a Victorian judge would be. If you got between 12 and 20 points, you are super, super harsh, but that's absolutely perfect. Victorian ages are all about harsh punishments. You're maybe a little bit too harsh, but absolutely perfect for a Victorian judge. So, now we've had to think about what different types of punishments you could do, and we've thought about how different people were punished in different ways. We're thinking about the young people. What happened to young people being punished in Victorian Britain at this point in time? Quite a lot of what we've looked at so far has really been older people or teenagers. I think the youngest was 17. So to do this, what you're going to have to do is go to bbc.co.uk and look at these particular class clips. You can see the link is on there, so be very careful when you're typing it to get it right. Put it into your browser and you will find that there are some docudrama clips being made up. They're about 7 or 8 minutes each, and there's 4 of them that you need to watch. You can watch them in any order you want to, but it gives you some information about the different punishments and the different ways that people lived. Now these are made up using information and records and things like that from real crimes and real people. So this is actually what really did happen to these people based on the records that we have. For each one that you watch, in your notes, wherever you're doing your notes, put the heading of the video. So life at a Victorian industrial school, life in prison for young Victorians, life in a reformatory school, and how the photographs and things were used could be your headings. And as you're watching, just take some bullet point notes, because you're going to use these notes for the next task. Now you can go back and watch these anytime you want, obviously, to help you with the next task, but watch them carefully first, and any interesting points that you think are useful, write down. So come out of this video, go and watch these, and then once you've done that, come back. It should be roughly about 31 seconds that you need to come back into so that I can explain the next task to you. So 31 seconds in, and by now you should have gone through the rest of the PowerPoint, and you should have gone and watched the BBC class clip bits. If you haven't done that, you need to go back and do it, because otherwise you cannot do this task. So your task for this week, okay, there's one of two things that we're going to ask you to do and submit. The first one is going to be a poster or a PowerPoint, or if you're feeling really adventurous, you might want to make a video or a PowerPoint that you're recording, because that seems to be the new thing just now, apparently. And you can put this together any way you want to. If you're a poster person but you don't have paper or pens and things like that, you can do it on the computer, or you can do it on a different program on the computer or on the iPads or anything like that. There's a really cool program called Canva, which you can use to make posters. It's free to download if you want to check that out, or you can just do it in a Word document. Whatever is something that you're going to enjoy doing it on, you pick whatever method you want to do it in. So what you should include on your poster is a heading, which is going to be young people in Victorian Britain. It could be how young people were punished in Victorian Britain. It's entirely up to you to pick a suitable heading that is going to be the main heading for your poster. You need to have some sections about each of the different video areas that you've now looked at on BBC Bite Size. So again, if you haven't done that, you need to go back, look up the address that you need, and actually go away and watch them, take some notes and come back. So you need a section about how the police used photographs and how they start to do that. You need a section about life in prison for the young people. So what was life like? What did they do? Information about that. You need a section about the reformatory schools, which was another type of punishment they could get if they were young, and a section about the industrial schools. A little bit of information about that. Your poster needs to be creative, so it should use words and images. It should be colourful. Make it the best possible piece of work that you can, and once you're done with it, take a photo of it, or if you've done it on a computer program, you could upload a photo or send a photo to your class channel and show what you've been doing with it. If you've got any questions about your poster, or you found some information that isn't in that docudrama bit that you want to include but you're not sure, just give your class teacher a shout and we will be happy to help you with it as well. Okay, so the second task for this week is going to be a describe question. Now, you have met these particular skills in first and second year, so you've been working on them, you should be able to do them. But just as a wee recap, describe questions are one of 6 National 5 skills that you're going to keep working on across this year. Basically what these questions ask you to do is describe something that you have learnt about in detail. So, for example, this particular question says, describe the punishments in Victorian Britain. They are always worth 4 marks at National 5, and the best piece of advice I can give you about these particular skills is that A, all of the information must come from your own head, so you won't get a source, you're not going to get any help, you have to just put down what you remember. B, proper sentences and full stops are your friends. So a describe question in history, similar to the ones in geography. It's asking you to literally put down on paper what you know or what you can tell about something that you're being asked. The way we structure this, as you can see here, we start with a starter sentence. You don't need it, you don't get a mark for it, but it just makes your answers seem a little bit more structured and a little bit more academically older than maybe, like, say, a first year answer would be. So to answer this question, I would maybe say something like, there are many different punishments in Victorian Britain, because there were. We've looked at some of them, but we've not looked at all of them in detail. Okay, and again, my highlighting skills are not great on this. So this is the first sentence that I write down. There are many different punishments in Victorian Britain. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to give 4 examples of punishments that I can describe. So I might say something like, firstly, one punishment was solitary confinement. And you can put a full stop. That's enough information. You could tell me something about solitary confinement to try and get an extra mark. That would be perfect. So you could say, firstly, one punishment was solitary confinement, full stop, and then say, as a separate sentence, this is where someone would be put into a prison cell by themselves for a period of time. And then you move on. The next point that you're going to make about a different punishment, you then start a new sentence. And you say, secondly, another punishment was being transported to Australia. And again, you could put that as a full stop and that's enough. Or you could give me something more. So you could say something like, secondly, another punishment was being transported to Australia, full stop. This could either be for life, or it could also be for life with hard labour, depending on how serious the crime was. Full stop. So, the second task that you're going to do for this week is you're going to have a go at doing this describe question and upload it in the assignments tab. So I've given you 2 examples you can use for your first and secondly point. You just have to finish that off, or you could start the answer completely from the beginning and write 4 punishment examples that you can think of or that you now know any way you want to. If you're not sure about it, ask your teacher for a little bit of help or a little bit of advice. Just put a message up in the group. And again, upload this as your answer for 4 marks for this week. And that's it for lesson 1. There's a plenary task for you to do there if you want to in your jotter. So it says, draw a doodle or a sketch of the most important thing you've learnt or remembered in this lesson. It could be anything that you remember. There are 2 tasks for you to now do, or you could have been doing them as you were going, which is your poster and your describe question. And you'll find information about how to do each of these in the assignments tab in the general file section. Any questions, please ask, and Mr. Keir, Dr. Milne or I will be happy to answer and give you as much help and support as you would like. Also, if anybody finds a really interesting Victorian punishment that we've not talked about, share it in the team. If you think it's actually quite interesting or it's quite gory or whatever, then let me know what it is and where you found it, and we can have a chat about that. Thank you for your attention, folks, and good luck on your poster and your describe question.